So my name is Siga, and I'm going to be presenting my project on the American influence on the Nuremberg laws. So I wanted to get started by talking about how I found this topic. And I found this topic through my inspiration, different inspirations that I have. One being my identity as an African American person, and also through my passion for social justice. But because of these things, I decided that I wanted to find a project that would help me learn more about racism, but I decided that I wanted to choose a project that would help me learn about racism that wasn't racism against Black people. So I said, you know what, let me do a project on the Holocaust to understand racism against Jewish people. And then it was brought to my attention by another teacher here that there was actually a connection between American racism and the racism brought against Jews during the Holocaust. And so I decided that was going to be my topic, and it brought me to my essential question: in what ways did American racism influence the racial legislation during the Holocaust? And so I created this timeline because I think it really shows that a lot of these events, well, specifically the American events, they happened all before the events during the Holocaust. So in 1865, we have the introduction of Black codes, and so this is actually the same year that the 13th Amendment passed. And so this was in response, in a way, to try and limit the freedoms that Black people were starting to gain. And these were like the first versions of Jim Crow laws. And then on to the 1880s, the Jim Crow laws start to expand across the entire country. And then in 1924, we have the first execution by gas chamber in Nevada. So this actually happens in the United States, not in Germany. And I found that to be shocking myself because I always put together that gas chambers for the use of executions would happen in Germany with the Holocaust and not anywhere else, but it happened here first. And then in 1928, we have Hitler, who praised the white Americans who gunned down millions of Redskins to a few 100,000. So this quote really shows that he was very much aware of what was happening in the United States, and other places in the world were aware of the events. And then on September 15th, 1935, the Nuremberg laws are enacted. And so this is a picture of the Nuremberg rally. You can see all of his supporters, you can see the swastika flag, right? And so actually in this same year, in the United States, there was a case that happened. It was a case involving the SS Bremen, which was an ocean liner, a German ocean liner, and it was one of the best in the world at the time. And so five American men went aboard this ship, and they took down the swastika flag in protest. And so when this went to the courts, Judge Louis Brodsky, he was a Jewish man, he acquitted all 5 men. And so this was a public rejection of Nazi ideals. And so the Nazis were very, very upset by this, and so they demanded that there be an apology. And there was no apology by Brodsky. He refused to give an apology. And so under the Roosevelt administration, the senator of the state at the time, Cordell Hull, he actually sent a formal apology on behalf of the United States. And in 1941 to 1942, I'm guessing it's evident, or we're all aware of the systematic killing of Jewish people in gas chambers. So this timeline really just puts together that these events that happened in the United States, they all happened before. And so these events, this happened after, 15 years after, right? And so it would be kind of hard to think that they weren't aware of what was going on, right? And so, not just putting together dates, I also have an example of the actual law, or an example of one of the Nuremberg laws. So in Article 1 of the Blood Law, marriages between Jews and citizens of German or related blood are forbidden. Marriages nevertheless concluded are invalid, even if concluded abroad to circumvent this law. So this was criminalizing the marriage between Jews and Germans. And then I have two examples of Jim Crow laws, one in Arizona and one in Florida. We have a Jim Crow law that says the marriage of a person of Caucasian blood with a Negro and so on shall be null and void. And then also in Florida, all marriages between a white person and a Negro or between a white person and a person of Negro descent to the 4th generation inclusive are hereby forever prohibited. So, right, we have the Jim Crow laws, and this is saying that it's criminalizing the intermarriage of black people and white people, or anyone who is white with anyone who is not white. And then with the blood law, we have criminalizing the marriage between Jews and Germans. And so what's interesting is that with black people, obviously, I can't become unblack. That's not going to change. I'm born with it. And so under the Jim Crow laws, you couldn't change that fact. You were going to be persecuted at birth. That is decided. And then similarly for Jewish people, if any of your grandparents were Jewish, you were considered a Jew. So this was something that you were born with as well. So this is another similarity. So this is actually a chart showing the classification of people. So this is showing that if you have 4 Jewish grandparents, then you would be a Jew, right? You would be Jewish at birth. It didn't matter if you had any ancestors that were full-blooded Germans, or like pure German race, whatever that they decide that could be. But then also on this side, you see that the only way that you could be a pure-blooded German is if you have all 4 of your grandparents that were not Jewish. And so what? This project, it has really shown me that these events that happen throughout the world are not just isolated, that I think they're all connected. And I think that the racism that happened in the United States 100% and most definitely influenced a lot of the racial structures that are seen during the Holocaust and the racial legislation, specifically the Nuremberg laws. And yeah, thank you.
Questions?
Oh, questions. Sarah.
Do you find any other examples of connections between the Jim Crow laws and the Nuremberg laws?
So there's a lot, and I didn't know how to get it all into the presentation, but there was actually a German lawyer, and so a lot of his work is quoted by Hitler and his men and his followers. But so he studied in the United States for around a semester, and he was studying American law. And so a part of that, he was trying to learn about the law. He was learning about the Native Americans and the ways that the United States was dealing with that and trying to basically push Native Americans out. So he was learning about the laws for that, and then he was also, after learning about those laws, he started to get more into the laws marginalizing black people and the methods and the ways that they did that. And then he wrote about those methods of racism and how to put that into legislation, and then that was then quoted by Hitler and his men, and so his work kind of brought over those ideas. Anita?
I know you researched a lot about the similarities between the two laws, but I was wondering if you have the differences between these two laws, and if so, what accounts for these differences?
I definitely did not put as much time into the differences I can 100% say. I can't say off the top of my head because I'm still a little nervous, but I can get back to you on that. Yeah.
Was there American recognition during World War II of any kind? Did any Americans see a connection between that and try to backpedal, or not even?
In my research, I didn't find that, but I don't think I think it would be embarrassing to make that connection, quite frankly. I don't think that anybody would want to be connected and say that, yes, us Americans, we created this influencer. Like, we gave them ideas as for how they could create these laws and make it successful, because it was successful here, right? I didn't find that in my research, but that is a great question. Yeah.
Was there ever like an instance where we saw like leaders from the United States like communicating directly with like German leaders? Like, was there anything that you found that showed like any like direct communication between these two?
So that wasn't really a main focus of my project, but I do think that the formal apology is an example of them being aware of what was happening, right? So like, it was under the Roosevelt administration, and like the Senator of State, right? Like, he sent a formal apology on behalf of the United States. So I think that's like as formal as I can get for like a formal person, but yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Did the Germans make a law right after that? About the
Immediately after.
What was the flag law?
I'm so sorry. So then there's also the flag law. So immediately after this SS Bremen case, I mean, after the judge refused to give an apology, this flag law was created at the Nuremberg rally, and so the flag law made it illegal for anyone to disrespect the flag. Yeah. Oh my goodness, Sages, hi.
Hi. Do you think that the American culture today reflects any of these ideals, like about, for example, like how there is sort of a agreement that you don't disrespect the flag, don't put it on the ground. This like idea of patriotism. Do you think that's sort of carried from this time period in both Germany and America?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the denial. I think it's not wanting to take responsibility for what happened in the past, so as long as you show like the positive sides of everything, you can like forget about the negatives. So I would say yes.
I think people have been persecuted or scapegoated throughout all of human history, and I think especially Jews. So I'm wondering, was this Nazism a direct influence, or was directly influenced by Jim Crow's, or was it just sort of the next in a long, unfortunate tradition of persecuting people?
I think a bit of both. I definitely think that there was influence from the Jim Crow laws because it had happened just before and it was so successful. I mean, it's like we're still dealing with that, like the results and like the aftermath of racism here, and it's not over. So I would say it's like still successful today. So I think they saw that as an example to recreate.
Awesome.